Caitlin is a perfectionist, and so she would get mad at herself, she'd get mad at her teammates, she'd get mad at her coaches sometime, but that's what made her such a great competitor. I used to always tell my staff, listen, let's not put a bushel over that light, because that fire, that light, that enthusiasm is hard to coach. It's kind of a natural given skill, and so we didn't want to dampen that in any way.
Caitlin Clark is not a traditional coaching project. She never was. She was never going to be the player you shape from scratch, install into a system, and gradually mold according to a tactical blueprint. That is not who she is. It has never been who she is. And the woman who coached her for 4 of the most remarkable years in college basketball history just confirmed it, on record, with her name attached. Without a hint of hesitation, in one of the most honest interviews a coach has ever given about a player of this magnitude.
I mean, once she told us she was not coming to Iowa, she was going to Notre Dame, it was over. I mean, we didn't pry into that, but we did notice, okay, she hasn't posted anything after she cut us. Now it's weeks are passing, and so I think we put a call into our AAU coach just to find out what was going on, and I realized then that she wasn't fully on board with her decision to go to Notre Dame, and so there was no sell at the end. She called me up, and I can remember exactly where I was sitting. I can remember the restaurant my husband and I were having, what we were eating when she called. I went out into the alley to get because I knew I was going to be exuberant if she, did commit to us. And she said, "Do you still have a spot for me?" Yes, yeah. I do. It didn't take long. So there was no sell at the end. The sell happened really in the years leading up to that decision.
In a candid sit-down with Sarah Spain on the Good Game podcast, Bluder was asked the question every Iowa fan, every analyst, and honestly every casual viewer has been waiting to hear answered. What was the toughest part about coaching Caitlin Clark? And Bluder did not dodge it. She did not reach for the polished press conference answer. She looked directly at the question and said exactly what she meant. The toughest part is sometimes she can be a little stubborn, Bluder admitted. And as I can be as well. That is it. That is the whole thing wrapped in one sentence: 2 stubborn people. 1 basketball program. And somehow, against all reasonable odds, it produced the greatest individual scoring career in the history of Division I basketball. Subscribe for more WNBA drama, records, and moments no one saw coming.
Sports, like you were like in the mosh pit of it all. You were right in the middle of it. Do you think
making
about that?
Making it happen. You literally you guided and led one of, if not the most famous women's basketball player that has ever touched a basketball. Like you are ushering in the next generation.
I really don't think about it a lot. For one thing, to me, Caitlin is just Caitlin. And so I guess, I can still give her crap, I love it.
But before we get into the friction, before we talk about stubbornness and challenges and transitions, you need to fully understand what Lisa Bluder actually was. Because this is not a story about a coach who struggled to manage a difficult player. This is a story about a perfect match. And you cannot appreciate how rare that match was without first understanding how special both sides of it were.
Under her direction, Iowa has made 10 NCAA tournament appearances, including each of the last 6 seasons. Iowa is the only Big Ten team and one of just 13 in NCAA Division I women's basketball to qualify for the NCAA tournament in each of the last 6 years. Tonight's victory is Lisa's 270th career victory at Iowa, becoming the all-time winningest coach in Iowa basketball history.
Lisa Bluder was not just a good coach. She was one of the best the women's game has ever seen. She spent over 2 decades at the University of Iowa, building something most programs dream about and almost none achieve: a consistent, year-after-year culture of winning. When she retired at the end of Clark's senior season in 2024, she walked away as the winningest coach in Big Ten history. Not just the winningest women's coach. The winningest coach across all sports, all genders, all eras of Big Ten competition. That record does not happen by accident. That record happens because of an extraordinary combination of basketball intelligence, player development, and most critically for what we are about to discuss, the wisdom to know when to coach a player and when to step back and let them breathe.
I've heard stories of Caitlin being very engaged in that as well, like recognizing that, I've got to also shine some light on my teammates.
Yeah, and she didn't understand that at first. And that was one of the things we really had to work on, was because, and I don't blame her. She comes from a high school where she did everything. She came from an AAU program where she did everything. And now she's expected to come to a university and share the wealth. It's different, right? And it's a mindset that's got to change a little bit. So we really worked hard on that, and we tried to explain to our players, listen, when her light shines, it shines on all of us, and we're all going to have more opportunities because of her.
That last part is what made Bluder so uniquely qualified to handle Caitlin Clark. Because the one thing a truly great coach develops over decades of competition is the ability to read a player. To understand the difference between a player who needs structure and a player who needs freedom. To know that forcing every player into the same system is not coaching, it is stifling. And stifling Caitlin Clark would have been the single greatest waste in the history of women's basketball.
For the record, she ties it with that one. This for college basketball history. She does it with a foul shot.
Let's be completely clear about what Caitlin Clark was at Iowa. She finished her college career with 3,951 points. She broke Pete Maravich's all-time Division I scoring record, a record that had stood since 1970, a record that countless players across 5 decades of college basketball had chased and never once touched. And she did it as a woman, on a stage that most of the sports world had not been paying attention to until she forced them to. She did it in 4 seasons, while also accumulating over 1,000 career assists, making her the first Division I women's player to ever reach both the 3,000-point and 1,000 assist thresholds simultaneously. She had 6 triple-doubles with at least 30 points, the most in Division I history. She scored 49 points in a single game. She launched logo threes that made entire arenas gasp before the ball was even halfway to the rim. She was doing things on a basketball court that the sport had never seen before. The numbers are not a record, they are a monument, and Lisa Bluder coached every single point of it.
Well, her first year, it was COVID, so she played in front of nobody. I mean, there was, nobody in the stands except for cardboard cutouts and things. So it was really unusual. That people didn't get to see her play. And then her sophomore year, that's when the first time people were coming into the gyms again and got to see her. But her junior year was when she really broke out. We knew we had something special just from seeing her in practice every day, the minute she stepped foot on campus. But I don't think the world got to see her until really her junior year.
Here is something people forget. When Caitlin Clark arrived at Iowa in 2020, she was not ready-made for team basketball. Not because she was not talented enough, she was clearly superior to almost everyone around her, but because of how she had been developed. In high school, Clark carried her team almost entirely by herself. She did everything. She scored, she passed, she created. She handled the ball from possession 1 to the final buzzer every single game for 4 years running. Her team's offense was essentially one player in motion with 4 others along for the ride. That is not a criticism of her. It is actually a tribute to her individual brilliance that her team won it all. But it meant that when she arrived in Iowa City and suddenly had genuinely talented teammates beside her, players who could actually carry part of the load, the adjustment was harder than anyone expected.
She's an unbelievable competitor, and I don't care what you're playing. And she was a great soccer player, and she really.
I know. I've heard that.
Yeah, and she attributes a lot of her passing angles to learning that on the soccer field, and it's so true. She is the best. Every time 3-point shooting, she is the best passer. It's amazing, and so she attributes a lot of that to soccer. But competitiveness, I don't care if you're playing checkers, if you're playing Uno. I mean, the girl is gonna win, and she has no fear of failure. And that, I think, allows her to really put herself out there and risk, with those threes and with some of those unbelievable passes that other people be like, I might fail. There's none of that with her. And then she works her butt off, quite honestly. I mean, the kid works.
She did not instinctively know how to distribute. She did not automatically trust the offense to keep moving when the ball left her hands. She had spent years being the answer to every single basketball problem her team faced. Learning that she did not have to solve everything herself, that took real work. And Bluder was candid about this. Clark's biggest early challenge was not her shooting mechanics or her athleticism or her decision-making at speed. It was learning how to play with people, how to lift teammates instead of carrying them, how to make the women around her better rather than simply outrunning the opposition on her own terms. Subscribe for more WNBA drama, records, and moments no one saw coming.
I mean, she has, raised the excitement of our sport. There's no doubt. Just because she does things in a different way than anybody else can do. Plus, she has all the intangibles. She's a great student. She's a great role model. She does everything. She loves being that role model. I really think that, when she came in as a freshman and she said, we're going to the Final Four, and a lot of people laughed at her and maybe even laughed at her for coming to Iowa, quite honestly. But she believed, we believed, and she got everybody else in that locker room to believe, and that is not an easy thing to do.
And she did grow. That is the detail that made Bluder most proud, and the detail that tells you everything about the coaching relationship they built. Clark arrived stubborn. Clark arrived as a one-woman show. And across 4 years in Bluder's program, she became something richer, something fuller, something the basketball world had not seen before. A player who could dominate a game with 40 points on any given night, and also dominate a game with 12 assists on another. A player who made her teammates genuinely better, who elevated the women around her without dimming her own light in the process. The 1,000 assist milestone is not just a number. It is proof of transformation. It is evidence that the stubborn, solo-carrying teenager from Iowa had grown into one of the most complete team players in college basketball history. Bluder coached that evolution into existence. Or more precisely, Bluder created the exact environment where Clark was willing to let that growth happen. And that brings us to the most important word in this entire story, trust. That is the foundation of everything that worked at Iowa. Clark was stubborn, Bluder said so herself. But Clark's stubbornness was always sitting next to something else. Something equally powerful, her competitive drive, her absolute refusal to be anything less than her best. The good thing, Bluder said, is that she was always willing to learn and she wanted to be her best, so she would take it. That single sentence explains the entire 4-year relationship. Clark might push back, she might resist, she might dig in hard. But ultimately, if you could connect the coaching to her hunger to be great, she would follow. Not because you outranked her. Not because you ran the program, because she wanted to win more than she wanted to be right.
It is with a range of emotions that I share with you today that I have decided to step down from leading the Iowa women's basketball team after 24 memorable years. After the season ended, I spent time with our student athletes and coaches reviewing the season and preparing those moving on for what comes next. With that also came personal contemplation about what this journey has meant to me, how to best champion this program, and what the future looks like for my family and me. After then, taking some time away with my husband David, it became clear to me that I am ready to step aside. Now, Bluder is 63 years old and coached at Iowa, as she said, 24 seasons. Before that, she was at Drake. She's the winningest coach in Hawkeye history and Big Ten history. She's a 3-time Big Ten Coach of the Year. Bluder led Iowa to the past 2 NCAA championship games, the only 2 in Iowa history, men's or women's. The Hawkeyes also won 5 Big Ten tournament championships and 2 regular season titles. She coached 2 National Players of the Year.
Bluder retired at the end of Clark's senior season, not because she had to, but because she chose to. Because after 4 years with the greatest player she had ever coached, after watching that player shatter the most storied scoring record in the history of college basketball and carry Iowa to back-to-back national championship game appearances, she understood that some chapters have a perfect ending. She walked away as the winningest coach in Big Ten history. She walked away with her legacy permanently linked to the player who changed the sport forever. And in every interview she has given since, including this one with Sarah Spain, there has been zero bitterness, zero resentment, and nothing but deep and genuine pride for what they built together. 2 stubborn, driven, uncompromising people who refused to lose, refused to settle, and refused to accept ordinary when extraordinary was possible. That is what a great coach-player relationship looks like. That is what it looks like when a coach truly understands the player in front of them.
I think it's ridiculous. I feel like her coaching style, because that's what the issue is here. She's not the average coach. She wants everybody to pass the ball, pass, motion offense, somebody will eventually be free. You don't do that when you have Caitlin Clark on this team. You don't do that. That just doesn't even make sense. It doesn't. I don't care what anybody says. All right? This girl's almost unstoppable right here. You put that ball in her hands. But anyway.
Now contrast that with what is happening in Indiana. Because the conversation about coaching Caitlin Clark did not end when she crossed the bridge from college to the WNBA. It followed her. And depending on who you ask, and increasingly the people asking are not fringe voices, the coaching situation with the Indiana Fever has not been a continuation of what made Clark great. It has been a quiet, ongoing battle against it. Stephanie White is a basketball coach with real credentials. Nobody is taking that away from her. What is being questioned, loudly, consistently, and by a growing number of people who watch this team with serious attention, is whether her approach is right for this specific player. White's system is defensive and tactical, organized, disciplined, built around structure, controlled spacing, and deliberate execution. In another context, with another star player, that might be exactly what a team needs. With Caitlin Clark, it is beginning to look like the wrong tool for the wrong job. White wants Clark to play in a controlled, off-ball, system-first style. She wants her integrated into a tactical framework built around defensive accountability and structured offensive movement. She wants Clark to fit into the system. But what Bluder's 4 years at Iowa made undeniably clear is that Caitlin Clark does not fit into a system. She is the system. She does not play inside a structure. She builds the structure around herself in real time, on the move, at full speed, with a basketball IQ that very few players in the history of this sport have ever matched. And the moment you start shrinking the dimensions of the court she operates in, the moment you start drawing lines around where she can and cannot go, you are not coaching Caitlin Clark. You are containing her.
Listen to Stephanie White.
Spoke with Caitlin last night, and I think just overall excitement. You know, I have been watching Caitlin play since she was an 8th grader, when I was coaching at the college realm and covering her games in college, and just an exciting time for me. Very excited to be working with her and this young team.
So you're saying that you've been watching her since the 8th grade. This girl been playing the same way. You've been watching her from junior high school to high school, all the way through college, right? Then you watched her first season in the WNBA where she went retarded. Then you joined Indiana, and now you want the ball out of her hands. Now you want Aaliyah Boston to be a point guard. Now you want the team to be about Kelsey. You want her to be a decoy. Do that make sense?
The criticism has not been small or fringe. Fans have been vocal and persistent. Stephanie White is focusing on defense and system at the direct expense of Clark's greatest strengths. And Clark's greatest strengths are not things you can replicate inside a rigid tactical structure. They are her offensive creativity, her pull-up shooting from anywhere on the floor, her ability to process an entire court at full speed and make decisions that most point guards cannot work out in slow motion, and above all, her freedom. Her ability to play without a ceiling over her head. The Iowa years worked because Bluder gave her a runway. She let Clark be Clark. She coached around the stubbornness, patiently navigated the early adjustment, and ultimately created the conditions for the greatest individual performance in the history of college basketball. White is building the ceiling, drawing lines on the floor, asking the most explosive offensive talent in the women's game to color inside them. And the basketball is not lying about what that produces. You simply cannot take a player of Clark's makeup, a player whose own college coach openly admitted resists traditional coaching, and hand her to a system-first tactician and expect the magic to survive. It does not work that way. The magic was never in Clark's mechanics alone. The magic was in the freedom, in the trust, in the particular kind of relationship that recognized exactly what this player needed and was wise enough and brave enough to give it to her.
Caitlin, just a couple of short years ago, when you looked up there and you looked at those jerseys, I went over to you, put my arm around your shoulder and said, Caitlin, someday your name's going to be up there. Your jersey's going to be up there. Today is that day, Caitlin. I've always said, if you can see it, you can believe it, you can achieve it. And through it all, you've stayed true to yourself. You've showed why it's wise to invest in women's sport, why it's wise to invest in women. It's not only the right thing to do, but it's the smart thing to do. Caitlin, you may be in Indiana now, but you're always a Hawkeye.
Lisa Bluder did not coach Caitlin Clark so much as she guided her. She created the environment. She held the standard. She pushed back when pushing back was necessary and stepped back when stepping back was wisdom. She understood that stubbornness in a great player is not a problem to be solved. It is a force to be redirected. She understood that a player who spent 4 years of high school carrying a team entirely on her own back was going to need patience, trust, and a very specific kind of development before she could lean on the people around her. And above everything else, she understood what too many coaches in professional sports still refuse to accept. You do not win with Caitlin Clark by putting a leash on her. You win by pointing her at the goal and getting out of the way. And just like that, everything changed. What you just witnessed isn't just another game in the WNBA, this is history in the making. Records are breaking, doubts are getting silenced, and the league will never be the same again. But the real question is what happens next. Because if this shocked you, the next game might completely flip the script. So don't miss it. Hit subscribe, stay locked in because the WNBA drama is just getting started.